we're good now. So again, appreciate your patience, brother. And definitely those who, are checking us out. But, before we were so rudely interrupted, you had mentioned that, growing up in Chicago, you came to DC, took some classes with Nana Kwabena. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima showed you, that the Egyptians were Black. I mean, it's really amazing because as you're talking those things about these very specific steps in your journey along the way, it's interesting because when I first came to DC, Nana Kwabena was one of the first people that I was able to encounter spiritually as well. And I mean, he's a tremendous pillar in our spiritual community. And I give thanks for him continually.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about how interacting with Nana and taking those courses from him were transformative as far as your consciousness and your
Sure.
love for culture and spirituality.
Well, for the benefit of those who are not from the area, Nana Kwabena Brown is one of the first persons in DC who introduced the Akan tradition to the DC community. And he's based in Southeast DC. He is the operator of the Temple of Inyame. And I was introduced to him via a homegirl of mine who was a student at Howard and had taken a class. And she thought that this might be something that I was interested in. So I signed up for a 7-week class in African spirituality. And Nana Kwabena is a really wonderful brother, a beautiful human being. And he introduced me to aspects of African spirituality that were new to me. And they just resonated with my soul. And one of the things that I recall at the conclusion of his 7-week course was when he advised all of the participants that the information that he shared with us needed to be used very carefully, because if it's abused, it could destroy your life for several lifetimes. Not just this life, but for several lifetimes. And that hit me, that stuck with me and helped me understand the seriousness of this information and my responsibility to utilize it correctly. And also, I credit Nana Kwabena with allowing me to borrow the first book I ever read on ancient Egyptian history. It was Peter Tompkins' masterpiece, Secrets of the Great Pyramid.
Yes, sir.
And I consumed that book. I love that. One of my favorite books.
And it's not a small book.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a serious publication.
Yeah.
And Tompkins, actually, man, just as an aside, Tompkins used to live in Northern Virginia. Brilliant guy. And I'm sure you probably remember Brother Bay.
Yes.
Who worked with WOL. Brother Bay brought Tompkins on WOL for an interview.
Wow.
And Tompkins was, not only was he a brilliant historian, he was, how can I describe him? He was a spiritualist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he referenced that during World War II, the British intelligence was aware that Adolf Hitler was using spiritual mediums to psychically project their consciousness into the war rooms of the British and American generals. And the Brits then pulled together a team of psychics, people with enhanced perceptional abilities. Gene Dixon being one of them. Gene Dixon was a famous astrologer who wrote a column. I remember her writing a column in the Chicago Sun-Times when I was growing up. And that, and matter of fact, Gene Dixon was the personal astrologer for Nancy Reagan, right?
Right.
So he was dealing with all this esoteric information that the general public is unaware of, but political officials, wealthy people know that this information is real. They know how to use it. So Tompkins was someone who was involved in higher levels of knowledge, higher levels of information. And his book, The Secrets of the Great Pyramid, just captivated my interest. And taking the classes from Nana Kwabena Brown in 1975, borrowing his book, Secrets of the Great Pyramid, prepped me for my eventual meeting with Ivan Van Sertima in 1977, and that sealed the deal. I was ready for Egypt. And the King Tut exhibit was in Washington, D.C. at that time. I had gone to see it once before I met Van Sertima. I saw the exhibit through the eyes of an artist. After learning from Van Sertima that the Egyptians were African, I went to see that exhibit armed with this new information, and I saw a totally different exhibit. I could literally see myself reflected in the artifacts of this boy King. And that's when my serious quest for re-educating myself with knowledge about ancient African history began. And I've been running on all 8 cylinders ever since.
Wow. You know, a couple of things. I met them in reverse. I met Van Sertima first, but in the 90s. Actually was fortunate enough to spend the weekend with him. It was actually Valentine's weekend. We brought him to Fisk. Ray Wimbush, he allowed me to bring Van Sertima to Fisk. And spent the week. I was his personal driver. We went and broke bread. I took him to, so we had a spot there called Mr. T's Afrocentric Boutique. And when me and Dr. Van Sertima walked in there, he says, he just exhaled very heavily. And he just said, wow. He said, this is an oasis in the desert. And he said, it reminded him of being back home. Yeah. And he started to tell us about the stories of being in Guyana. Yep. And how he would be in the forest and it's pitch black. And he said, you could see the sounds. He said, you can see the sound that a snake makes. And that's how you knew what a snake was. And he just told these brilliant stories, you know, and it was such a beautiful experience for me, you know. And at this time, Doc Van Sertima, his mind, you know, he started to slipping in. I don't know if it was dementia or, you know, as he started slowly. And so he had to ask me, he said, Jeff, where are we again? And he would ask me, like, where are we again? And I was, you know, I was just like, come on, Doc, I got you, bro. We good. We still in Nashville. Let's kick it. But then when I came to DC is when I met Nana Kwabena. And, you know, and a matter of fact, it's so crazy, brother, because I was a classmate of his daughter, Abena. You know, we were in class together at Howard, and I never put the two together, Kwabena, Abena, you know, because we're in class. And then I had a naming ceremony. I did initiation with the Osiris Set Society with Orwahe Medu and the, you know, the family up there. And I invited my entire class to my naming ceremony. And, you know, and Abena was there, you know, a few of them came. Sure. And then I later learned that her father was actually Nana Kwabena. I said, oh, snap. And then I looked at her, I said, that's why you were so comfortable in my naming ceremony. You know, it was a full-blown African ritual, you know, with the drumming and the, you know, the deities coming down and everything. And she was right at home, and I wasn't able to put those two things together. Sure. One other quick thing, brother, about Peter Tompkins, because he's also the author of The Secret Life of Plants.
Exactly. Peter Tompkins and Christopher Boyd wrote The Secret Life of Plants. Yeah. And, you know, see, you're taking me back now. So PFW in the 80s had a program called Morning Reading. And it was conducted by a brother by the name of Kojo Olahunio and Brother Kalanji. And I was the very first study group I participated in the late 1970s was with these two brothers and a couple of other brothers. And because they were working at the radio station, I had become aware of The Secret Life of Plants and recommended that they read that book on the air for the morning reading. And one of the things that they did on the chapter on the Wizard of Tuskegee, George Washington Carver, they interviewed a professor at Howard who was a student of Carver's at Tuskegee. And he gave some background about Carver and his life and how he interacted with the students. So yeah, man, we've had some wonderful times here in DC, and another two more components with Van Sertima and Nana Kwabena Brown. So I credit Kwabena with putting me on this path. And so I had the opportunity this past summer to repay my debt to Nana Kwabena Brown. I tell everybody in Harvey, I am where I am right now because this man put my feet on the path. And so I had the opportunity this past summer to gift him a trip to Egypt.
Wow.
So, you know, he was there with his 85-year-old aunt, his niece, and it was just part of this wonderful group that we had. And so it was as if the student is now become the teacher, and he's in a position now to take his teacher on a journey of discovery. So that was phenomenal. And I also had the pleasure of traveling to Mexico with Van Sertima in 1990 and 1991. 2 tours to Mexico back to back. He took us to the home of Alexander von Wutenow, who had at that time the largest collection of terracotta heads of Olmec figures in the world. We saw his private museum. I mean, just had some really wonderful experiences, and I've had the pleasure of traveling to Guyana on several occasions. And on one of my trips, I met a brother who was a classmate of Van Sertima, and we both spoke at Georgetown High School, where they both attended high school, right? And the thing that's so interesting and so sad, very few people in Georgetown had ever heard of George G.M. James, who was born in Georgetown, or Ivan Van Sertima, who was born in Kitty, right outside of Georgetown. Even the instructors at the high school, the librarian at the high school had never heard of Ivan Van Sertima. So it just represents the tragedy of many of our scholars who have dedicated their careers to investigating African history and culture, and are forgotten even in their homeland. I recall, and as you mentioned, during the latter years of Van Sertima's life, he was suffering from dementia. And I remember being with him at one speaking engagement and him telling me, almost on the verge of tears, that writing They Came Before Columbus in 1977 was the end of his academic career at Rutgers University. So the hatred for the scholars who teach these historical truths is real. Yeah. The effort to keep us mentally enslaved is real. And as a consequence of those realities, I'm compelled to do whatever I can do in order to educate whoever is willing to be educated and introduce them to the truth of who we are so that we can restore our proper place in the world.
And what's the title that you go by as far as like cultural restoration?
Well, so my background is in graphic design and advertising, right? I have no formal training as a historian, archaeologist, Egyptologist, public speaker, author, none of this stuff. So I do it, it comes from the heart. And so I understand the need to be creative in branding yourself. So in my latest incarnation, I am a memory recovery specialist.
There you go, memory recovery specialist.
Memory recovery specialist. And that's what a historian does.
Yes.
It covers the memories that have been lost, stolen, or made illegal. And yeah, that's an apt description for what I've dedicated, over 42 years of my life doing.
Okay. And so you say that the hatred is real and that there's a concerted effort to keep those memories from being restored.
Absolutely.
And I've been to Benin, and there is actually this tree, the tree of forgetfulness, to where the plaque there says it was a ritual that occurred. And so before they would take the enslaved Africans out of Ouida and load onto the ships, they would make them walk counterclockwise around this tree for the purpose of putting some type of spell in to where the memory would be disrupted and they would no longer have a memory of from where they came from. So then they would be less likely to attempt to return home. They would be more likely to settle in to their new place and to their new identities. And so what is it about memory that's so important to disrupt and to restore? What is it about that?
Well, brother, you're a psychologist, right? And you know as well as I do that our reality exists here in our mind. And memories are all there is. Everything is a memory. Everything is a memory. So whoever has access to your memories has access to the totality of your existence. I like to quote often the opening statement in George Orwell's 1984. He who controls the past controls the future, but he who controls the present controls the past. Right?
Wow.
So in the present moment, if you can erase people's memory of their past, then they're literally suspended in time and space, and they will become whoever you say they are. They will become niggas. They will become, hoes and bitches and all these things that deny their humanity, and they'll embrace that. So for me to be able to restore my memory and incorporate the knowledge gained from that restoration into my life, and model that for myself, my family, my peers, my contemporaries, and then make that my life's work to go out and restore the memories of anyone who is willing to participate in this act. Because I've learned over time, and I've kind of mellowed over the years, and I've accepted the fact that everybody is exactly where they want to be. Mm. I embrace the ideas of karma and ma'at, cause and effect. And we create our own realities. I know that to be a fact. And everyone is exactly where they want to be. And I don't have the right to come in and move somebody in a direction that they're not willing to go. I don't have that right. And so I can sit back and accept the fact that, as you know, as a clinician, man, our folk are lost. Mm-hmm. And I understand why they are lost. But I also understand that they have a karmic debt and a responsibility to desire to restore what was lost. Mm-hmm. And if they aren't willing to accept responsibility to be actively engaged in that process, I can't do anything to change them. The old expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You could write a book, but you can't make black folk read it. Right? Right. So, I accept that, and that is reality. But the counterpart to that is, we live in a world of spirit, and this physical reality that we have been socialized to believe is the totality of existence is less than 1/10 of reality, and that the spiritual dimension of the multiverse is where everything occurs. As an artist, as someone who's trained as an artist, I understand that to my core, that everything that will be already exists. It already exists. There's nothing new in the world. And what artists do, what musicians do, what creative people do, people who are inspired do, is tap into that field of nothingness. And nothingness is not nothing in the traditional sense of the word. It is the source of everything. Right. And when you can tap into that realm of nothingness, then you can access whatever you desire. So the question then becomes, what do you desire? What do you want? So the deeper your memories are of what we have accomplished over the course of, conservatively speaking, 100,000 years, we have those memories. We carry those memories in us. One of the things that I learned from Richard King, one of the conveners of the Melanin Conference, a brilliant psychiatrist, a brilliant historian, chematologist. One of the things that I remember learning from Richard, this is back in 1986, 1987. He says that scientists and geneticists know that you can clone a human being by taking their genes and manufacture another human being. But what they don't tell you is that within your genetic material are all of the memories of all of your ancestors. That genetic memory is real. Genetic memory is real. And so one of the reasons why our memories had to be erased and the erasure had to be forgotten is for us to be active participants in that ritual that you talked about in Ouida, the erasure of our memory so that we will become good slaves, servants to our masters. And just as our memories have been erased, our memories can be restored. And my job as a memory recovery specialist is to find ways to present information to people such that it resonates with their being and they want more. And once they have opened the door, once they have opened their minds and given me permission to give them more, I give them as much as they can handle. They do our Egypt on the Potomac. They go to Kemet with us. They participate in other activities, and their lives are transformed. And that's what I know my mission is. So, yeah.
Wow. And Amos Wilson's The Falsification of African Consciousness, he talks about those experiments that took place with the manipulation of a person's conceptualization of of their timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And they will be hypnotized and given a post-hypnotic suggestion of when you wake up, you have no past. And it will present a specific personality. And you wake up and your present is doomed. It will present a particular personality. You wake up and you have no future. A whole nother personality would emerge. And he was demonstrating, it was a science magazine called Omni, OMNI, Omni.
Omni magazine. Yes,
You
sir.
remember that?
Published by Bob Guccione, who was the publisher of Penthouse magazine.
He was the publisher of Penthouse too?
Publisher of Penthouse magazine.
Wow, man. See, all these connecting dots that, it's like, how would the person that publishes Penthouse, which is sexual energy,
yeah,
right, also be tapping into these aspects of science as well, right?
Well, you look, man, we live in a world of multiple realities, and everybody has a dark side, yes, and a light side. Yes. So Guccione used the money that he made from Penthouse because sex sells, right? Yes. The internet is a worldwide phenomenon, but I read somewhere that over 50% of the websites on the internet are sexual oriented websites. Yep. So that's a part of life. It's a part of reality. So, but what Guccione did was to invest some of his money into Omni magazine, which was a magazine about science and the future, right? And I share this with you. It's funny, man, because you're digging up some stuff. You're bringing back some memories.
Hey, I'm a memory restoration, brother.
There was a line that I read. I used to subscribe to Omni magazine because it has some fascinating stories. I'm big on science. I'm big on science fiction. I love information. Yeah. There was a line that I read in Omni magazine attributed to a Greek philosopher whose name I'm forgetting right now, but this line resonates with me to this very day. And it says, the most judicious trait that any person could ever cultivate, the best trait that a person could ever cultivate is the judicious sense to know what not to believe.
Wow.
To know what not to believe. And when I look at where we are right now as a people, we are more confused now, more divided now than at any point in time in my memory. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the technology that has been made available to us, that was developed first by DARPA, DAR, Defense Advanced Research Program. DARPA developed the internet for the military so that military computers could communicate with one another. And once the military saw how this technology could be used for civilian populations, they made it accessible such that it would distract and distort the consciousness of the general public. So as a result of a generation or two being immersed into social media, the internet, cell phones, and all of this stuff, people have short attention spans, and anybody with a microphone now is a commentator, has a radio program, is an expert on something that they know nothing about, and they only impress people who know less than them. So, this idea of cultivating the judicious sense to know what not to believe is more critical now than at any point in history, because we're literally being bombarded with foolishness and BS 24/7, 365. And as a consequence of that, those folk who know me know that I've been saying for the longest time that the majority of our people are not going to make it, right? And I've been throwing out some numbers. 10 years ago, I might have said that 95% of our folk are not going to make it because they're not mentally, physically, spiritually, or emotionally prepared for what's coming. But I've kind of dwindled that number down to maybe 2%.
Wow.
And it's just a reality. And I could sit comfortably with that reality, knowing that we have been sold a false bill of goods with the Judeo-Christian Islamic concepts of heaven and hell. I know, based on my study of African cultural traditions, West African and East African cultural traditions, I know that our ancestors knew that there is no such thing as death. The body is temporary, the soul is eternal. The soul comes back into a new body to continue your life's journey. So I live my life. I've lived my life for the last 45 years with this understanding. And the things that I've done have reinforced this reality to me. Mm-hmm. Specifically, the 14 years that I've spent excavating tombs on the West Bank of Biloxi, going in and out of tombs, understanding the mindset of the people who created these structures and who were part of a 2,000-year continuum of creating these structures. They knew this clearly, and that our oppressors have hidden this information from us, convinced us that we were born in sin, convinced us that we have to, and because I'm with you, I can say it, convinced us that we have to believe in a dead white man on a stick for our salvation, and that heaven and hell is real. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that all of these are false narratives that were created in order to separate us from our authentic selves. So, it's more important now than at any point in history for those who are ready to be actively engaged in restoring their memory so that they can begin to fulfill, as Dr. Wilson would say, their cosmic assignment. Everybody was born, made a commitment in your prior lifetime to come back in this lifetime to do specific work. And when you recognize what that work is, you align yourself with the universe, man. And once you are in alignment with the universe, with Ma'at, with Newt, and all of these feminine cosmic forces, there's nothing that can stop you from fulfilling your destiny.
See, and so what I'm gathering is this is far more than an intellectual exercise. It's intellectual and then some. He's speaking about it on the spiritual level. You're going back to what you were talking about as far as the realm of nothing, the nothingness, right? Mm-hmm. That was made very real for me. I went to under Dr. Wimbush's guidance. I went to Gambia in undergrad, and I actually finished the book of Water and the Spirit while there.
Yes.
Oh my God, man! I finished it in the back of a cab. And when I closed that book, I looked at my driver. He told me his name was Bob. I said, Boubacar. He's like, I was like, man, you ain't Bob. Anyway, I asked him, did he go through an initiation? Did he have his rites of passage? Mm-hmm. And he said, yes. And, so from that point forward, I was on a mission to experience an authentic African initiation. And I was fortunate enough to be initiated with the Jola there in Gambia. Mm-hmm. And then I took a trip a few years later to Ghana and was initiated with the Ebe. Mm. And when I tell you, Tony, that the stuff that I saw and the stuff that I experienced, it expanded the parameters of what I thought reality was.
Exactly.
It blew those walls back for me. And it's like what you were saying, being able to tap into that nothingness and bring any and everything out of that space. Mm-hmm. And so when I moved to DC to go to Howard, I made a vow that I had already had the Medu Netter, volume 1 and 2. Then I had the book, The Afrocentric Guide to Spiritual Union by Ra Nefer Amen. And I was on a mission. I saw in the book that there was a spot in DC. So I'm up at Howard. We were having a grad school meeting or whatever. And I had the Afrocentric Guide to Spiritual Union. I was reading it while I was waiting on the meeting to start. And the sister said, "Where I know you from?" And I said, "I don't know. You do look familiar." Found out later she was in Nashville at the same time we were. Okay. But she pointed to the book. She's like, "From there?" I was like, "Nah, but where is there?" And so she told me that's when we're up on Georgia Avenue. And when I tell you, man, I found my way up there. I fell into a ritual, and it was a Sebek ritual. Mm. And, the sister that opened the door is Sheket Amsa Masut, the wife of Shekem Teper Amsa. And she answered the door just pleasant. "Hey, welcome," just sweet, pleasant. Mm-hmm. Man, when I tell you we got into that ceremony, man, and she carried Sebek, she taught me total personality shift. Mm. And I'm telling you, it just gradually began to show me that we are exactly who you're saying that we are, brother. Mm-hmm. And just when you were talking, I was thinking clinically, because it's kind of the same thing, is where we get consent on the front end. A person comes to us when they want help. They will come to us when they want their memory restored, when they want their identity healed, when they want their mood and emotions smoothed out, right? And it's the same type of thing. And ethically speaking, we don't take a person any further than what they're ready to go. And it's just a phenomenal process that you're describing, man. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Dr. Wells, and of course I was going to get to her at some point. There's a correlation between Dr. Wells and your actual mother? What's the correlation there? Like the same birthday and what is
Yeah,
it?
they both were born March the 18th, 1935. My mother was born in Alabama, but moved to Chicago when she was about 5. Dr. Wilson was born in Chicago. Dr. Wilson finished undergrad, came to Howard for medical school. My mother moved to Washington, D.C. in the mid 1970s. And they both died in the DC area. Dr. Wilson was like my spiritual mother. She was, a beautiful soul, man. Just a beautiful soul. As a matter of fact, and I can share this with you, man. Pisces, something in my spirit has drawn me to Pisces women.
Okay.
So there's a karmic lesson that I needed to learn. And my mother and I in the 90s consolidated households. And I was having a challenging time dealing with my mother. And so I reached a point where I called Dr. Wilson and said, look, I need to talk to you. And we had several sessions, and I have no problems acknowledging the fact that I went to see a psychiatrist to help me negotiate a difficult period, a challenging period in my life. And Dr. Wilson gave me the keys to resolve these issues and cultivate a meaningful and lasting relationship with my mother. And you know Dr. Wilson well enough to know that she's a child psychiatrist.
Yes.
And one of her theories is that the consciousness of a female at the time she becomes pregnant is the consciousness that she is mentally locked into for the rest of her life.
Yes, sir.
So we talked about that. And once I really internalized the significance of that statement, I knew that whenever I was having difficulties trying to have a meaningful conversation with my mother, who at that time was maybe in her late 50s, early 60s, and the conversation would go south, I realized I'm talking to the 15-year-old Ann Browder. She was 15 when she was pregnant with me.
Right.
Once I realized that's the personality that's front and center now during this particular conversation, then I'm going to withdraw from the conversation and wait until the 65-year-old Ann Browder is present. Wow. And we can move the conversation forward. So, going to someone who is skilled in understanding how the mind works and can help you negotiate difficult periods is essential, because we all are psychologically damaged, emotionally damaged. We all are. Every person I know has some degree of craziness that's running through their lives. But we can manage the crazy.
Right.
We can manage the crazy. And that's part of what this whole thing is all about, man. We all have, and correct me if I'm wrong, we all have multiple personalities. And each personality is a different spirit that's around us, a different ancestor that, and I'm just, building on something that Richard King has shared with me, that we carry the memories of our ancestors with us. And what dawned on me, man, is that, I have the spirit of my grandmother in me, who introduced me to spiritual traditions. I have the spirit of my grandfather in me, who introduced me to creativity, right? And I know when to call on my grandfather in order to help me accomplish specific things. I know when to call on my grandmother to give me spiritual comfort, right? And so I do that. I call on these ancestors. And so there are also other ancestors who are part of our being who we may not know. Right. So to be able to recognize when you're feeling a certain way and acknowledge the fact that, no, I'm not comfortable with these thoughts. I'm not comfortable with where I am right now. And I make a conscious choice to put these thoughts aside and redirect my attention on thoughts, on personalities that I know will be beneficial to me at this particular point in time. So to be able to manage, this house that holds your spirit, to be able to manage these spirits that move through us is essential to us reaching our full potential as human beings and fulfilling our cosmic assignment.
Yes, sir.
We're getting a little metaphysical, but I like to do that. I mean, that's part of my being as well. So it's good therapy.
Yeah, man. It's really deep though, because I'm teaching theories of personality actually at Morgan, and I teach the Eurocentric perspective as well as the African-centered perspective. And as I was teaching the course, I began to understand and realize that well, our Orisha, the Neteru, the Abasun, all of the Lua, all of the different deities, so to speak. I came to understand that they're actually personality types, and like you say, they move in and out. And so if we need the personality that's more fiery, that's more courageous, that might be more aggressive or assertive, we know how to chant a particular chant that evokes that particular energy. And we literally take on that personality. And in the Western model, it's more of an individualistic approach, of course, to where you have this personality is relatively the same throughout your entire life. And then when you start to deviate from that, what they call this locked in personality, now you start to manifest pathology, right? And when you have it from the African centered perspective, it's like, no, it's like what you're saying. No, you have these other aspects, and it's in your best interest to master as many of them as possible. So then they become conscious and intentional shifts as opposed to triggered against your will shifts, right? And when I orient the students that way, they just sit back like, oh my God, it's like what you're saying. It's more than just intellectual information being imparted. It is literally a reclamation of a part of their being. It's awakening of some of that, what you call genetic memory, right? It's realigning certain things for people. And I think that if we understood better as a whole, that these aren't intellectual exercises, that these are actually tools of empowerment, I think more people would be more apt to choose to get on this journey of waking up.
And they have to be trained, man. We don't have the systems in place right now to shepherd young children into adulthood, to help adults manage some of their issues. Those systems no longer exist because the memories have been erased, the erasure has been forgotten, and the social orders that maintain them have been obliterated. Right. So we're doing the best we can to pull the fragmented pieces of our soul back together again so that we can heal and move forward. So to that end, man, I want to encourage everyone who's listening to get a copy of Malidoma Some's book of Water and the Spirit, because like you, when I read that book, I said, if 1/10 of what this book is real, it means that we need to re-examine everything that we
everything.
Oh, and speaking of re-examining everything that we think we believe, tomorrow is the birthday of Neely Fuller. I think he's going to be 93 years old.
Mr. Fuller.
So yeah, shout out to that brother who has shaped hundreds of thousands of lives around the world.
Now check this out. Mr. Fuller's birthday is the same as Dr. Wells's father. It's amazing.
Enough said.
It's amazing. I mean, I owe so much to Mr. Fuller and Dr. Wells. And I mean, I met both of them in Nashville initially, and Dick Gregory, and then moved to DC. And you talk about the beauty of living in DC. It's like, you'll pull up at a traffic light and Dick Gregory be in the car next to you, or you in the grocery store, hey baby, or you see Dr. Wells and giving her free lectures and workshops at Howard, or she's at the Thurgood Marshall, but and Mr. Fuller, it's Chocolate City, and Benjamin Banneker knew what he was doing, with the energetics of it. And the other people that were the founding, fathers of the nation, helped to lay out the city and all that. They knew exactly what they were doing with the energy that's there present. One thing I wanted to say before we move on too far, I mean, man, there's so much, I know time is not on our side, especially with that technical difficulty at the beginning, but brother, a lot of people don't understand that healing aspect of Dr. Wells. A lot of people, they know her for her theories and the race and racism conversations, but a lot of people have never explored her as the healer that she actually is, being a child psychiatrist, but she was third generation physician. She had an auntie that she described as a whirling dervish, said that she would go out in the field and would spin. And then when she stopped spinning, she was aware of which root or herbs to pick to deal with an ailment that one of the children, Dr. Wells included, was experiencing. And a lot of people don't know that part of her. And, being in DC and as close to her as you were, and as close as I was able to get with her, it was a whole nother vibe. And, when in the book, Osiris Papers. Yeah, when I was sitting and meditating on what contribution I was going to make, it came to me to just talk about her as the physical embodiment of Auset, of nurturing Auset energy, the embodiment of that Neteru. And it goes back into what you were saying about the personality. It's like we have these personalities, we have these these God level energies that we're able to manifest in our day-to-day walking lives.
Yeah. What's so special about DC are all the souls that gravitated to this place, man. So thinking about Dr. Wilson, you can't help but think about Segment Dr. Patricia Newton.
Yes,
Dr. Can't help but think about Dr. Edwin Nichols, right?
Yeah.
Can't help but think about all of these significant people here in the nation's capital who have made incredible contributions to our advancement as a people. And unfortunately, most people in the world don't know anything about them, have never heard of them.
Right.
So we've been blessed, brother. We've been blessed to live in the DMV.
Yeah, I mean,
and
yourself,
run in the circles that we've run in.
Yourself as well. Let me fast forward a bit. I'm trying not to look at the clock and feel some way about it. But look, check it. So you recently went to Ghana. We're talking about this legacy piece, and you were installed. And I want to bring Atlantis into the conversation. Your daughter, she wrote a book, her first trip to Africa. 7 years old. How old?
She was 7 when she went to Egypt, and 8 years old when we published the book.
And full circle, when I you sent me the pictures when you got back, you're in Stuhlman. The first thing I recognized, like, wow, he's there with Atlantis. You were able to do this with your daughter. And to me, that was the dopest part of the whole thing. And you made a statement, Tony. You said that this was destined before she was born, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Talk to me about it, man.
So short version of the story. I don't know. There's this philosophy that we choose our parents.
Yes.
Our soul makes a contract to come back into the physical world in order to continue specific lessons relative to the continued advancement, maturation of that soul, right? And so accepting that fact, I had to accept the fact that I chose to be born to a teenage mother whose, the man who impregnated her rejected her. And she would marry a man when I was 5, divorce him when I was 10. And I would spend the rest of my life without a father figure in my life. And the absence of a father figure put me on the path to seek out men in my life who would have been the fathers that I wish my father had been. That's why I gravitated to Asa Hilliard. That's why I gravitated to John Henry Clark, why I gravitated to John Jackson. And I saw in them the things that I wish my father had imparted to me. And I basically clone aspects of their personality to my personality. So when Atlantis was born, I felt a similar connection. And so one of the things that I did was to make sure that our vibration, our energy vibration would be the same. So I, named her based on the conversation I had with John Jackson. Her name is Atlantis Tae Browder, right? And the name Atlantis came to me from a conversation I had with John Jackson, who was the author of my favorite book, Introduction to African Civilization. And he talked about Atlantis as being off the coast of West Africa, as being one of the oldest civilizations. So I chose that name for Atlantis. Tae is short for, the name of the wife of Amenhotep III, the grandmother of King Tut, one of the most powerful rulers of Kemet. And so I chose Atlantis' name so that we would have the same initials, so that we would have the same syllables in our name, so that we would have the same vibrations. So when Atlantis' mother and I separated and ultimately divorced, I was compelled to make certain that I remain in her life as a father figure, because I didn't want her to grow up without knowing her father. And ultimately, I got custody of Atlantis when she was 4 years old. So I've been raising her as a single parent since she was 4. So I am certain beyond a shadow of a doubt that our souls made a commitment to be in this relationship as father and daughter in this particular lifetime. And we've journeyed together, man. And she's been excavating tombs with me in Egypt since 2010. Every year she's there, and everyone has seen that famous photograph of us in the burial chamber of Karakorum. And now that I'm 71, and Atlantis just turned 40 last Saturday. So I'm at the point in my life, in my career, where I'm looking at legacy building. I'm looking at parceling off my business and giving segments of my business to young folk that I have worked with over the years, over the decade or so, so that the work can continue through a new generation. So Atlantis Browder is going to be Tony Browder 2.0. I keep telling her that. So for us to be invited to Ghana to participate in the All African Education Summit that was organized by Dr. Ed Bush, Nana Obis-Kessie, Nana Akwa David Whitaker, and a brilliant team of people brought to Cape Coast, Ghana, over 300 African-American and non-African-American scholars, educators, administrators, counselors to Cape Coast University for this week-long conference. We interacted with Ghanaian scholars, African-Americans who have been living in Ghana for years, as well as groups of Queen mothers. And as part of that week-long activity, we were installed on the 21st of September in the village of Moray. So to be installed in Moray, along with my daughter, who's installed as a Queen mother, was confirmation of this pact that our souls made lifetimes ago in order for us to walk this journey together, for me to pour my knowledge into her and for her to take this information to the next level. And with the knowledge that all of this is going to benefit future generations. And I feel comfortable talking about this now. If we accept the fact that we've been here before and we will come back, then one of the reasons why I'm so compelled to do this work is because I know I'm laying the foundation for a future incarnation. Yes. When I come back, I will reap the benefits of the things that I set in motion in this lifetime. And that's how this thing called life works. I'm convinced of that. I live my life with that knowledge, and I trust that I can validate this to others who are looking for meaning in their life. We do have options, and to be able to ground yourself in full acceptance of your African identity is what life should be about.
Wow. Speaking of legacy, brother, you got a grip of books out there. You know, you got the Browder, from the Browder Files 1 and 2. You've got the Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization. You've got your book on the breaking down the movie Avatar. I mean, Brother Browder, tell me, and I love the way that you decode movies. We were fortunate enough to, I was fortunate enough to be a part of the breakdown of the movie Black Panther. We did that at the Thurgood Marshall Building with you. You know, I felt really good to be able to, you know, share a piece of the stage with you, brother. Forever grateful for that. And speaking of Black Panther, you mentioned Atlantis. And so the next one, you know, they're actually battling, you know, King Narmer and the Atlanteans, you know, which is very profound to me because they look like they have like South and Central American, you know, the headdress and their theme, right? Very, very profound. I'm so looking forward to that movie. But if you don't mind, talk to us about the journey of producing your books, your works, you know, just whatever comes up for it, you know, and then we're going to talk about the Egypt on the Potomac tour and then Asa Restoration Project.
Okay. Well, my former training is in graphic design and advertising. And I grew up in a household with my grandparents. And one of the things that I recognized about my grandfather was a talented man. He could build anything, carpentry, masonry, he could do it all. He probably never got past the 6th or 7th grade. So living in Chicago, racist Chicago, with 7 children and 1 grandchild in the same household, he was frustrated beyond measure. And I thought my grandfather was an angry, frustrated Black man, and he would take his frustration out on my grandmother and some of his daughters. And I really didn't understand what was driving him until I became older, and specifically until after my grandmother died, and I basically gave the eulogy at her funeral and was reflecting on their relationship. And I understood why my grandfather was so angry, frustrated in Chicago, never able to make a decent living, to take care of his family the way that he wanted to take care of his family. And that affected me to the point where I made a promise to myself that I was never going to put myself in that position where someone could determine how much money I can make. So I've been self-employed for 42 years. My first business was a graphic design business where I used my skills to do my graphic arts thing. And that gave me the flexibility to work as hard as I wanted to work, to make as much money as I wanted to make, to buy the books that I wanted to buy, to read the books, to travel to conferences, to meet the authors of the books that I was reading. And that then put me on the path to travel to Egypt. Traveled to Egypt with Dr. Ben in 1980. 1981, January of 1981, I gave my very first lecture in Lee Cook's house, who's now Sheikh Orwa, right?
Yeah.
And gave my very first formal lecture in DC in May of 1982 at WPFW.
Man,
Right?
I was 2 years old, 3 years old, and 5 years old. God.
So I started IKG in February of 1982. So IKG is 40 years old. I closed my graphic arts business in 1987 and dedicated my time and energies to IKG, full stop from that point on. But what really put me on this path was channeling my grandfather. Helped me understand creativity, helped me understand what I shared with you earlier about nothing is the realm of everything. Right. And once I understood that, I realized that the only limits I had on myself were the limits that I placed on myself. So without knowing that I couldn't write a book, I wrote a book. Without knowing that I couldn't publish a book, I published my own books. Without knowing that I couldn't do tours to Egypt, I started doing tours to Egypt. Without knowing that I couldn't lecture, I couldn't do all the things that I've done, I did it knowing that this was something that I wanted to do. And I was able to call down, from the creator, from the ancestors, the energy to manifest my desire. So that's how I've lived my life and done the things that I've done. I don't even remember if I answered your question. What was your question?
No, you're answering it. So Egypt on the Potomac.
Yes, sir.
How did you come up with that, man? That's a brilliant tour. I mean, it's beautiful. And again, thank you, brother. For y'all that don't know, I got Brother Browder to come out of retirement and do a tour for the Sankofa homeschool community. And so it's a homeschool community, brilliant community ran by beautiful sisters and brothers. And we took the kids on the tour, the Egypt on the Potomac tour. Again, shifted their world, brother. How did you come up with that concept?
Well, when I was in high school, I had aspirations of being an architect. So my last 2 years of high school, I took drafting and architectural courses. Chicago is the home of architecture. The very first skyscraper was built in Chicago. The very first elevator and the first skyscraper was in Chicago. Chicago has some of the most magnificent architecture in the world. So I grew up in this environment. I went to high school in Oak Park, Illinois, and walking to high school every day, to and from high school, I walked past two Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. So Frank Lloyd Wright was one of the premier American architects. So I was inspired by the detail, the creativity, and I wanted to be an architect. My freshman year in college at the University of Illinois, I majored in architecture. But then when I was ready to leave Chicago, I decided to come to Howard and I changed my major to design. So in my heart, I'm an artist. I'm an artist who has a profound appreciation for architecture, for buildings, for what goes into the construction of buildings, the construction of spaces around buildings. And so when I became interested in history, specifically Kemetic history, what my skill is, and Asa acknowledged this years ago, my skill is I look at history through the eyes of an artist. And I can break down the symbolism in a structure. And as Lynn Jeffries said, I read a building like a person reads a book. So
Wow.
I can look at it and I just know, right? I just know. So I had come up with this. I had come from my second trip to Egypt in 1985 and was still on a high of having gone to Egypt twice. And as I'm walking around DC, I'm having flashbacks of Egypt, looking at the Washington Monument. I go to Meridian Hill Park and I see things in Meridian Hill Park that reminded me of things that I'd seen in Egypt. And with my background in advertising and design, I knew that that wasn't an accident. Right. So I began researching the history of the layout, design, and development of Washington, DC, and what was originally known as the Afrocentric Tour of Washington, DC was created in 1986.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of the process. And then I rebranded it in 2005 as Egypt on the Potomac Field Trip. So that is, my ability to tap into creativity, my ability to look at things that everybody sees, but see something different about it, with the knowledge gained of Nile Valley architecture, Nile Valley history and culture, the knowledge that I gained from Nana Kwabena about African spirituality. I open myself to spirit and I hear things, I see things, I feel things, I know things. Yeah. And I allow that process to work with me. And as a consequence, I have produced everything that I have produced as a result of my being in alignment to that process. And the process speaks for itself.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude. And you've been able to duplicate yourself because now you have other people, your proteges are actually running the tour. Matter of fact, one brother texted me today, he's interested in doing research in Alexandria.
Oh, the Quayle, yeah, Quayle.
Yeah.
Just got his PhD from Howard in the psychology department, man.
Yeah, that's what he was saying.
Last December.
That's what he said. He said, you probably need to see me to remember you. He said he just finished in counseling. He said he just realized I left from Howard and was at Morgan. I was like, man, I've been at Morgan 12 years, brother. But yeah, so he's got some interesting research. And I did not know that he's the grandson of Benjamin Quarles.
Absolutely. Who taught at Morgan, right?
Yeah, man. Chair of the history department. Beautiful, man. I was like, that legacy just continues. He's got his grandfather's fire, that quest for knowledge, that quest for historical recovery. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing what you're doing, brother. I mean, I've been watching for a while, your Wisdom Wednesdays where you're putting people on, you allow people in the community to come and share their knowledge. Not only that, but you have employed and inspired younger generations to come in and do the work with you. I mean, that you got something good when you can hand it off to somebody else. You can trust somebody else to walk your baby down the street like that. And I mean, I commend you for that, brother. Watching the clock, let's talk about Asa Restoration, named in honor of the late, great Asa Hilliard. Tell us about that, man.
Let's see.
Yeah, I know. Like, where to start?
When did I first meet Asa? I think I probably met Asa at the Nile Valley Conference in September of 1984 at Morehouse, a 4-day conference. Wow. And it was at that conference that I realized what I wanted to do with my life. I saw this phenomenal I met Charles Finch at the conference. I reconnected with Van Sertima at the conference. I met Runoko Rashidi at the conference. I met Naeem Akbar at the conference. I met all these brilliant scholars. Yeah. And as I sat in the audience and watched presentation after presentation after presentation, I said two things. One, I want to do that. And two, I want to create an opportunity to bring some of these same people to Washington, D.C., so that the people in my community can experience what I have experienced. So 1987, Memorial Day, 1987, I did my first Free Your Mind lecture, which featured Asa Hilliard.
Nice.
And we brought in Asa, I think the second speaker, and then we were doing lectures on a monthly basis. So Asa, Naeem, Hunter Adams, and Ed Nichols were the first 4 people in the program. Wow. So we brought in, all of the great scholars we were able to bring to DC, and that program ran from 87 till about 92, 93, and then it morphed into Wisdom Wednesday. And it evolved into the Metamorphosis conferences. But Asa was my rock.
Yeah.
Asa at that first Free Your Mind lecture, Memorial Day 1987, started his lecture talking about 10 things that contribute to why people of African ancestry can't work together.
Wow.
And then he built his lecture around those 10 things and how we can neutralize those 10 things. So when I wrote the Browder file, I asked Asa if he would write the introduction. And I specifically asked him if he would incorporate those 10 things into his introduction. So Asa said, yeah, man. And Asa's name on that book, when it was published in February 1989, is what has made that book a perennial bestseller. Because at that time, nobody knew Tony Browder, but everybody knew Asa.
Everybody, yeah.
You know, and so that book has been a game changer. So I owe Asa for helping to consolidate the path that I've walked. The study tours that I do to Egypt were modeled after the study tours that Asa did. I went to Egypt with Asa about 4 times. And I just like Asa's comportment. I like his demeanor. I've never heard Asa say anything bad about anybody in my life. He was the kindest, one of the kindest and gentlest souls I ever met.
Gentle giant.
He and Dr. Clark were like cut from the same cloth. And
Yeah.
I love both of those men. And so when Asa died suddenly in Egypt on the 13th of August, 2007, it broke my heart. And as I'm dealing with my grief, I needed to find a way to honor a man who meant so much to me. And that opportunity came in July of 2008 when my best friend in Egypt, Abunaga Gabriel, introduced me to Alina Pistakova, who had just rediscovered these lost tombs of South Ossetif. And she gave me a private tour of her work. She was 2 years into the excavation. She had run out of money. And I could hear Asa in one ear saying, Tony, you know, this is what you were prepared to do. This is why we walked with you, brother. You need to move on this. I hear Dr. Clark saying, don't worry about, raising the money. A way will be made for you to do this. And I just told her that I'll raise the money and we'll make sure that this work continues. And the Asa Restoration Project was born on September the 21st, 2008. And we have, over the past 14 years, we've raised in excess of $1 million.
Nice.
To fund this work at this site. I'm not a fundraiser, but I've been doing it. I'm not an archaeologist, but Alina insisted that I come and work at the site. That I can't just, I can't just give money. I need to be there because this is a team effort. Right. And I really have come to respect Alina, her dedication, her knowledge. She's opened me up to a whole new world of knowing. And, and I'll share this with you, brother, because as you well know, it's not easy doing this work. Right. And one of the things that initially disturbed me was when the members of our own community castigated me for working with this white woman, accused me of giving money to this white woman. Right. And I had to mentally step outside of that in order for me to continue this work, because I realized that they're only looking at one slice of this situation and they don't see the whole picture. They don't see what I see. Right. And what I can say now, 14 years into this project, that we have literally helped to rewrite the history of Kemet. We have restored the Kushite presence in the Nile Valley. We started off 14 years ago with 3 tombs. Today, we have more than 17 tombs. We make new discoveries every single year. Wow. And the thing that was impressed upon me 2 years ago that really brought everything in alignment is we're discovering new tombs. We're finding tombs that were built to honor the spiritual legacy of these Kushite men and women. And one of the most important things about these tombs that we have inside the tombs are the names of the individuals and the statements that they say as their heart is weighing opposite the feather of my eye, right? Wow. So we have scenes carved in the tombs where priests are bringing offerings to Asar. in order for Asar to elevate the spirit, the souls of these individuals so that they can live forever, call their names and bring them into existence. So as we discover new tombs and find the names of the original occupants of these tombs, we can speak their names and give them life again.
Wow.
But that's what's happening right now. That's what's been happening for the past 14 years in South Africa. So we've got all of these ancestors, brother,
Right.
all these Kushite ancestors that are protecting us, that are guiding us, that are ensuring that this work will get done. And right now we're poised to complete the major portion of this project and open the 3 primary tombs of Karakomen, Karabashkin, and Nezbanejed in 2025. And so after 2025, I can kind of step back and you know, I've got things in place so that I can do some other things and know that this work will continue, and there are other things waiting to be discovered. In South Africa, on the West Bank of Luxor, in Kush, in Ethiopia, in other parts of Africa. And let me just share this with you, man, just to kind of complete the story of our installment.
Mm-hmm.
We were installed in the town of Moray, which is right near Cape Coast, Ghana, West Africa. The citizens of Moray credit a man who traveled to Ghana and established the first fishing village in Ghana. Moray was the site of the first capital in Ghana. And this personality, and I'm blanking on his name right now, so please excuse me, he was said to have migrated to Ghana from Mali. And that as part of the traditions, his ancestors had traveled to Mali from the Nile Valley. So the people in Moray have traditions, and an oral tradition, as well as songs that speak of their ancestors having migrated there from the Nile Valley. Now, they don't know what they're singing about. They don't understand the connections, but what this installment has brought full circle is the discovery that I made in Egypt in 2016, when I found the Sankofa symbol painted on the ceiling of 2 tombs, the Akoma Sankofa symbol, which then opened the door for me to begin tracing the migrations of Africans from the Nile River Valley into the Niger River Valley. And through the help of Dr. Finch and others, I've been able to find more research to substantiate 6 migrations from the Nile to the Niger between the 6th century BC and the 6th century AD. And that these Africans brought their cargo of knowledge to Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, the Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Benin, Cameroon, and the last migration was in Mali. So my name, Segu, is derived from the city of Segu in Mali, which is the 5th largest city in Mali. And as I was researching that city and my name, I found in Wikipedia a listing for Segu, and there's a photograph of a roundabout in the city, in the center of the city, and in that roundabout is a Tekken, right? So, and then I was told by Nana Obakesi, the chief who orchestrated all of this, I was told by him, when I asked him, well, why did you give me the name Segu? He said, I didn't give you the name. Priests in Moray, who I've never met, who I have yet to meet, selected our names based on our vibration. So the ancestors told them to give me that name. Wow. And so what I see as my primary responsibility as a chief in Moray is to do the research to uncover the connections linking Africans from Ghana to Mali and from Mali to the Nile River Valley, and build on those connections, strengthen those connections so that we can establish a firm link between East and West Africa. And the other important part of this is that I also realize that since African Americans were taken from West Africa, were taken from Mali. You mentioned Benjamin Banneker. Benjamin Banneker's grandfather was a prince, was a Dogon prince.
Yep.
So I don't know how Thomas Jefferson and George Washington knew that, but they knew to hire Benjamin Banneker to do the celestial observations to lay out the 10-mile square that became Washington, D.C. So
Yes,
the
sir.
pieces of this puzzle, brother, are fitting together perfectly. I don't know where it's going, but I'm enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
you know, it's great to be able to have this journey with my daughter and to be able to share this journey with you know, every Black life that matters to me.
Right. So a couple quick points, man. You talked about the whole naming process. So I actually learned about naming from, you know, you mentioned Lee Cook earlier, where you did your first talk was at his house.
Right.
You know, he actually literally wrote the book African Names, you know, showing the spiritual process of divination to show, you know, the life purpose of the destiny, the reason for the person being here. And then you name them according to that, and which is what the priest actually did, you know, on your behalf while you were there. And also, did you get a chance to check out that Yikwe Armor book, Osiris Rising? That
Not yet. I have it, but I've gotta dive into it.
You're gonna see, man, it's amazing. I think it was either Mali or Ghana where they were, but they were in search of some tablets from Egypt that came in one of those migrations, and they had stored them. Somebody was stored them in the ground, in the floor, and they were coming to see them for themselves. It's a beautiful story. Okay, so Brother Browder, you know, I'm not gonna keep you. I know you already missed Star Wars, huh?
No, Star Trek, the next generation. So
okay. So real quick,
pleasures.
Hey, we got plenty of them, but we need them. You know, doing all this heavy lifting that you do.
Absolutely.
So real quick, if you don't mind, tell people how they can get in touch with, you know, IKG, get their hands on your books, Egypt on the Potomac tour, all of the wonderful things, the trips to Egypt. How can they find out more information on that stuff?
Everything that we do is located on the IKG website, which is ikg-info.com, www.ikg-info.com. And the latest project that we have in development right now is the domestic application of the Asa Restoration Project that is being done through the auspices of the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project. That project is scheduled to be completed in December the 10th. Okay. Is the date that we've established for the completion of that project. And just briefly, the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project is my response to what I saw as some of the shortcomings in the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Phenomenal museum, an incredible architectural model that begins our story in the basement in slavery.
Right.
And it doesn't talk about who we were before our world was turned upside down. So the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project was designed specifically to give the backstory or the origin story to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It covers 8,000 years of African excellence and success. So we've got a 25-foot long mural that we showcase on the 10th of June. That's on the second floor of the Thurgood Marshall Center. And we've got other exhibits that we will install in the Thurgood Marshall Center. We're redoing our Egypt on the Potomac displays. So we'll have on the second floor of the Thurgood Marshall Center a permanent exhibition that will highlight who we were before the Ma'afa, before our world was turned upside down, and our presence here in the nation's capital. The fact that Egypt has been rebuilt on the Potomac. And I am certain beyond a shadow of a doubt that, and I'll share this with you. This is another interesting aside that I got from, what's Harry's last name? I'm forgetting the name of Harry, brother who passed a couple of years ago, but he was one of the principals involved in the African American Civil War Museum. Okay. So Harry Edwards, I think it's Harry Edwards or Harry Jones. But anyway, this brother knew the Civil War like I knew Kemet. Wow. Phenomenal speaker. And he spoke at the Thurgood Marshall Center once and talked about the fact that there were Africans who gave themselves, Africans from West Africa, who allowed themselves to be captured and enslaved to be brought to the Americas where they could find other brothers and sisters who were part of a secret society.
Wow.
They allow themselves to be captured, and that the brother laid out this story. I think Harry Jones, Joni Eisenberg at WPFW featured Harry quite often on his show, and he talked about this. And Harry said that these Africans were part of a secret society, and they worked during the Civil War, and they were part of Lincoln's Loyal League. They were an underground network of spies, of secret agents who helped the Union win the Civil War. So this idea of Africans helping to establish here in the capital of the wealthiest nation in human history, West African elements and East African elements that have been hidden in plain sight. And all of this information is encoded in the architecture and the symbolism of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So what we're going to do with the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project is to tell that story. We've got a curriculum that is associated with that. We'll make that information available in the next phase of our efforts to restore the memories of the people who've been written out of the respectable commentary of human history, as Clark used to say.
Wow.
So that's IKG, man. That's what we have on the front burner.
Now, last question. What does IKG stand for?
When I first created IKG in 1982, IKG stood for the Institute of Karmic Guidance.
Yeah.
It was all rooted around my understanding of karma, cause and effect, and the realities of that. When I expanded Egypt on the Potomac in 2005, I realized that we were branching out, we were blowing up. And a number of people who were scheduling private field trips were church groups. And I saw that some of our Christian brothers and sisters did not understand this concept of karma, and they saw it as something negative, derogatory, or evil. So the marketing aspect of my being said, I need to neutralize this aversion to this concept. And so in rebranding the Afrocentric tour of Washington, D.C. as Egypt on the Potomac, I also rebranded the Institute of Karmic Guidance as IKG. So when someone asks me what IKG is, depending on that person and the consciousness of that person, I may say it represents the Institute of Karmic Guidance, or I'll say it represents information, knowledge, and growth. We do the research, provide information, we share that information with you in the form of knowledge, and the application of that information allows you to grow through the utilization of this knowledge in your life. So nobody in their right mind would reject information, knowledge, and growth. So it's marketing, brother, marketing 101.
Hey, man, I'm learning a lot, brother. Man, I really appreciate you, Tony, for taking the time out tonight, man. I love you, brother. Value everything that you contribute into our continued growth. And I was telling you earlier that I was trying to figure out my next steps, but I feel reinvigorated. I've been feeling a little disconnected, and trying to really just figure out, like, I need to tap back in, but it's not tapping back into the same thing. It's got to be something else. And, you've given me the motivation tonight to go ahead and just push forward and understanding that I'm on path and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right. Well, thank you, brother. It pleases me to hear that. And, you're saying that reminds me of one of the last conversations I had with Runoko Rashidi when we did a program on Father's Day of last year. And he stressed how important it was for people in the community to see brothers communicating with each other and demonstrating love and brotherly affection. So it's my honor to have this conversation with you. I appreciate what you're doing. And of course, you know this, but I want to say it publicly, whatever you need to help you do what you need to do for yourself and your family, I'm here. Call on me.
Likewise, brother. Appreciate you, man. Have a good night, man.
All right, thank you, brother. You take
Much
care.
love, Tony.